Welcome to In a Nutshell, the podcast dedicated to all things agricultural consulting. I'm Dylan Brush here with soil genius and ag consultant Bill Brush, and we're delighted to accompany you on this journey where we break down the different aspects of agricultural consulting. In each episode, we'll dive into the realm of agriculture through the eyes of Bill Brush, where consultants like Bill play a vital role in empowering farmers, agribusiness, and agricultural organizations. If you're passionate about agriculture, problem solving, and enjoy a little bit of detective work, this podcast is tailor-made for you. Welcome back to another episode of Agriculture in a Nutshell. Today, we're going to talk about Bill Brush's core principles.
Thank you, Dylan. I think everyone, whether they be farmer or whatever your profession is, you need to have some core principles that drive you. And so I developed these over a period of time, just understanding as I went out. I didn't have them when I began, and maybe in a few more years I'll have not just 8 core principles, but maybe 10 or 12 core principles, things that you need to do in my profession to be able to understand, evaluate, and ultimately make your client or customer more profitable.
Now get ready for Bill's first core principle.
My first core principle, number 1, is understand what you are wanting the plant to do. Now that sounds like really simple. Well, I want that plant to grow, okay? But what type of plant are you growing? And what ultimately is that your function of what you're wanting that plant to do? Okay, I'm going to use a very, very simple term. I'm going to grow lettuce, okay? When I'm looking at lettuce, I'm trying to grow a very, very vegetative crop that's probably 90% water or more. So I want to make sure I have a great root system that can take up water. I have a great microbiology in that soil that helps both water and nutrients flow into that plant, keep them watered properly. But what am I trying to prevent? Because nobody thinks that they want to prevent anything. In a plant, you just want max growth and max of everything. No, I don't want that plant to waste any energy, any time, and ultimately any resources to reproduce. Because I am not harvesting the reproductive portion of this plant. I do not want a lettuce crop to go to seed. It immediately ruins my crop. You can take a vegetative crop like cabbage or lettuce, head lettuce, even green leaf lettuce. And when it begins to change, because eventually it will in the growth cycle, from a vegetative crop to a reproductive crop, it will take the sugars, the sweetness that you'll find in lettuce or cabbage, and it will turn those sugars and complex carbohydrates and turn them into the seed head, because it needs that energy of those sugars to produce the seed quality and the seed germination quality that you need in a lettuce crop or in a cabbage crop. Okay? We're not trying to grow the seed part. You know, a lot of people will look at a carrot field and see it when it bolts. And when it bolts, what we say is the top starts to take energy from the carrot itself to make a stalk to basically create seed on the top of it. Okay, so why, if we don't know that's what we want the crop to do and we just feed it normally like we would feed a tree crop, we're going to get some effects that we don't want. And conversely, when you go to a seed crop, like and I'd grow them, almonds and walnuts, that's what the plant essentially wants to make, is the seed, because that's how all crops are always being able to survive and not go extinct, is they have to produce seed. Whether it's weeds in your garden, weeds in your field, you know, the crop itself, everything is based on survival and reproduction. Okay, because of that, when you have a nut crop, you're trying to make the reproductive body, so you're going to grow it in a different way than you're going to grow a vegetative crop. I have another crop that is a seeded crop, a fruit, what we call stone fruit, peaches, nectarines, apricots. The most important function of that tree is to produce the pit. However, we as the grower, the farmer, want the flesh. That's what we're going to consume. That's what you're going to sell. That's what's going to be eaten. And the pit is essentially thrown away. But for the plant itself, that is what the plant is most concerned about. So if you don't fertilize in the proper fashion, if you over-fertilize at certain points, it just continues to make a bigger and bigger pit. You're giving it all the nutrition it wants. It's going to make the best seed possible. But what we want to do is produce a viable seed so that that plant is now satisfied, and then we're going to grow the flesh beyond it. Same way with a nut crop. We want to put everything we can early on to get that to basically make as many and retain and set as many of those seeds or nuts as possible. If we've done that, then we can take them to the end of the growth cycle and harvest that for more profitability. So understand what you want the plant to do. Do you want to make it reproductive, or do you want to make it vegetative? You know, if you're going to go with the basic thing that starts cell division, which is nitrogen, the nitrate form of nitrogen is what's going to deliver to that plant those things that make it most vegetative. If you're wanting to come back and grow a reproductive crop, it is ammonium nitrogen that forms those precursors that make that plant think reproductively. So if we fed nothing but ammonium to lettuce, you're going to get it to bolt or go to seed much faster than you'd like it to. If you just grew nitrate nitrogen to any seeded crop like that, other than what was retained in itself from the previous growing year, it's going to run out and it's not going to be near as reproductive as we want it. So there's a style and way to feed these. I talked a lot about that in the nitrogen. As I go through more podcasts, we'll talk and get into the weeds a little bit more and really go into what happens. But know that there's two forms of nitrogen that the plant can take up, ammonium and nitrate. And they do two totally different things. So that's my first core principle.
Now Bill's going to get into talking about his second core principle.
The next, and that's before I start anything, I need to know what I want this crop to do. You know, I've been places around the world where they said, well, I remember one distinctly. I showed up and they said, well, you're the pineapple expert. And I said, I don't know a thing about pineapples. And it's like, well, what are you doing here? What I need to know is what this crop does and when it does it, so that then I can fertilize properly. I can have that fertilizer available when the plant desires it. Not after the fact, but before, so that it's sitting there waiting when the crop needs to do that. Because we need to know, are you harvesting the reproductive? Now, yes, you are in a pineapple, I know that, but how do we want that pineapple to mature? When does it load up on sugar? And then you can form a fertility plan. So understanding what you want the plant to do, you can do that with almost any crops if you have the basics of the fertility issues that I spell out in these podcasts. And eventually you'll have a better and better understanding of the crop you grow also. So number 2 on my core principles. Plants are indifferent to your needs. If you're growing corn, that plant, that corn stalk does not care if it fills to the tip. That corn does not care if it yields 200 or 300 bushels per acre. It only knows it needs to reproduce. And it reproduces at the level of fertility you give it there. Same thing with the tree crop. The almond does not care if you produce 2,000 pounds of nut meats per acre or 3,000 pounds. It's going to produce at the level of fertility you provide for it. And making sure that fertility is there when it's needed by the plant. I mean, I'll make it sound simple. You know, we don't put any fertilizer on. We get to July and we decide, oh, I got a really big crop. I'm going to fertilize. I put all my nitrogen, all my potassium, any nutrients, micronutrients, I put them all on in July. My success is not going to be very good because I put everything there, not when the plant needed it. I put it all there, and nonetheless, the bill was paid. We put this amount of fertilizer on and we didn't get a result we wanted because we didn't meet the plant's needs. They're indifferent. They're going to produce at the level of fertility that we provide for them. And we need to make sure that we are ahead. Why do I mean we need to be ahead? Well, when you apply fertility, whether it be nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, to the soil today, and it's a large, active, growing tree, it takes a minimum of 30 days from the date I applied it before it gets to the growing tips, and sometimes longer. But I'm just going to say it's 30 days. So if I look at my tree and I say, gosh, I need to put nitrogen on, and the crop needs it now and it's not there, I'm 30 days late. I'm not ever going to catch up. So the plant is just doing what you're directing it to do based on the level of fertility. Now, if I overapply, that doesn't help me either. Like I'll put it all on up front because nitrogen, as we know, will leach as it turns to nitrate and it won't be available to the plant anyway. So we need to prudently apply our nitrogens at times that can be taken up, the type of nitrogen we want to put on to give the plant what it needs, and because it doesn't really care what we want it to do, it cares how it gets nutrients from the soil. And so when I say it's indifferent, it's just like those things that go to seed. That's what its biological function is to reproduce. So it doesn't care that we want to cut it at a vegetative state, Same way as you look at tomatoes, it doesn't care if we have nice, large, lots of solids in that tomato. It's just trying to produce the seeds in that tomato. It's just kind of crazy. So the same way if we look at peaches, they always overproduce. I mean, anybody that's grown peaches in any place, we come in and what do we have to do? We have to manually thin them because they overproduce their reproductive part. And if we allow them to happen, we'll have a very, very difficult time ever building up the size flesh that we want because we have too many units. So we artificially pull them off and thin them down so that we have a reasonable number that we can sustain and make the size and the sweetness and the solids that we want in that tree fruit. We know in premium wine grapes that we will go through and we will artificially take out some bunches, bunch thin these grapes because we want a certain quality of fruit, whether that be on table grapes for size, whether that be on wine grape, not as much for quality, but for character, the flavors and complexities that it adds to wine. Those are the things that we have to thin down for. So we artificially have to do these because, again, the plant's indifferent. When we're growing wine grapes, it does not care about the juice, which is what most of the flavor and things come from. It doesn't care about the skins, which we get a lot of color and flavor from, and character. It cares about the seed, which we have no, use for. We're getting them out. We may press them and hold them on that for a while, but ultimately we're throwing that all away. So the piece that's most essential to the grape is not wanted by us at all. So we are growing again. They're indifferent to what we want. We have to deliver that to them in the timely manner that they need it. Same thing with irrigation. If you want to stress something, what are you likely to make it do? You're likely to make it reproduce. So in things like vegetables where you're wanting the vegetative portion, if we stress it, it went to seed a lot quicker than we wanted it to. So therefore, when we're looking at that water stress, like not adding water when we need it or putting too much, all of these things add up to the same issue. You're going to drive it to a place you don't want it to be.
Now Bill's on to his third core principle.
My third core principle comes from Charles Walter, who established Acres USA many years ago. He said, if plants could talk, you couldn't stand the noise. And I've always said that at a lot of times that I've been speaking, because one of the things is the plant a lot of times is showing you through some of these micronutrient deficiencies. It's showing you through growth patterns. It's showing you from the shape and size of leaves what I am missing. And it's you as a detective, you as a farmer, you as a consultant have to recognize those signs so that you could go out there and you can then hopefully be ahead of the curve. And if it's going to be minimized, lessen how much it's going to minimize your crop by recognizing it early. Understanding what those plants are telling you. And then next year learning from the fact that I wasn't early enough, say with phosphate. I need to get some phosphate into that plant earlier than I did last time. A classic crop that, in fact, you don't have any time to think that this plant's going to tell you anything. It's all going to be too late. I did some work on some radishes years ago, and they were having trouble with the internal part of the radish being what we called too pithy. Didn't have enough structure, wasn't hard enough. So when you slice it, it didn't make nice clean slices. It was sort of mushy and not really solid in the middle. Okay. Well, a radish, and if you've ever seen a radish seed, it is tiny, tiny, little tiny grain. Very, very small. And when it's planted like that in seed form, it takes only about 20 days. Sometimes 19, sometimes 21 or 22. Sometimes 1 or 2 days is a huge difference. So if everything that you need to grow that radish of the quality you need to grow it And in that pithiness of radishes, it's potassium. You need it for cell wall strength. So if you don't have it all there from the beginning, when that radish germinates and takes up nutrients and grows that radish in that short amount of time, it's a huge difference between where that seed is and just 3 weeks later when you're harvesting it, how big the radish is and the top. Okay? If it's not all there when you plant, you won't make that radish be anything like you want it to be. So again, the plant in this case can't talk to you, but from previous experience, you should know what it's going to say to you if you missed it. And so therefore, always listen to what that plant's trying to say and your soil's trying to say. If you're getting a little bit of water and you see standing water, it's telling you we don't have the proper pore space because we can't absorb that water properly. And then you know your microbiology is not going to work good. So if you look not only at your plants but your soil, it's telling you a lot. And you just need to listen and watch and see what's going to happen. And you'll be much improved.
Now Bill's moving on to his fourth core principle.
Number four, my fourth core principle is I use Kinsey Perry-Ag Lab samples to determine my deficiencies and excess. I went with this lab from my very beginning because I know of the quality of both the results, what I can do with those results, and the quality of the lab I send them to, because I'm very comfortable that the soil sample I sent them and the results I get back are very, very relatable and are done as best as can be done in the industry. I'm so appreciative of both of these organizations, Kinsey Ag Service, Perry Ag Lab, to be able to provide me with the quality of samples so that I can do the proper information. They've been really good. Since I've started consulting, I've never sent a sample to another lab because I'm so confident that those numbers mean something to me that I can repeat and repeat on any part of the world that I've consulted on and any crop I've consulted on. I know that at least those numbers will tell me the direction I need to go.
Rapid fire, we're moving right into the fifth core principle.
My fifth core principle, real simple. Make a plan, Go into every season with this is my plan, okay? This is what I'm going to put my nitrogen on. These are the types of nitrogen I'm going to put on. Here's what I think the crop size should be. I'm going to feed to this crop size. So if I'm going to feed to that, I need this NP and K. I need a certain amount of sulfur or my micronutrients in place. And I put my plan together. I also, at the same time I'm making that plan, I said, when am I going to put those nutrients on? That's essential too. I can't just put them all on at the end or all on in the front and expect them to deliver the type of fertility throughout the growing season. So I know how I need to apply these nutrients. I know I started a long time on a person that they furrow irrigated and they ran, basically their water down the furrows, and they put most of their nitrogen on and side dressed it just before they started irrigating. And one of the things they always said, well, I can't irrigate and I can't put nitrogen on while I irrigate because I know it's going to run out with the tailwater. And I said, well, the only difference is you're losing that nitrogen, but your nitrogen that's formed nitrate, you're losing a good portion of it because you put it on too early, and as it forms nitrate, you're going to lose a good number of it when you side dress. So we talked about how we could change that, and we found a way to recycle the tailwater, and we basically upped their production. We put on some at side dress, the rest of it we water ran, and then we recycled it through tailwater back into their irrigation system, and we basically upped their production up in Northern California from 240 bushels to sometimes as much as 300 and above bushels per acre. Also, we improved their bushel weight on corn from 56 to 62, making them heavier, more dense, and basically a lot better feed quality. So those are the things about making a plan, okay?
Now we're moving on to Bill's sixth core principle.
Then once we've made the plan, number 6 core principle is execute the plan. Just don't make a plan and say, that was a good plan. We didn't do a darn thing on it, but it's a plan. We need to execute, which is an action step. We decided what we need to do, when we're going to do it, and then we put it out. Now then, how many times have you put out something and the plan is not as as it was laid out because we had rainfall. We had some anomaly in the weather that didn't allow us to execute the plan properly. That's called, you just sometimes got to farm, which is dealing with weather, what it gives you, and then learning to go around it and do the best you can to get to the end, because we are not ever going to get perfect weather. Perfect, everything in our program works perfectly. The water we use is perfect irrigation water. Everything about that is never going to be perfect. But if we don't try to execute the plan we made, we're never going to get to a place to where we can actually get to step 7, my seventh core principle.
Now Bill's moving on to his 7th core principle.
Evaluate the results and adjust. You go back, you look at the weather when you get all done with harvest. You evaluate how our production was. We talk ourselves through it and say, why did we get above normal or above our expected yield? And put those things into our memory for next year's plan and adjust the plan we just did for next year so that we are ready. That's any crop you grow. You're not going to be better if you just take, this is the plan, this is what we do. We do this you do A, B, C, and D, and you get E. That's what we do every year. You're going to under-fertilize a lot of years. You'll over-fertilize in some years. You need to evaluate your results and then adjust. And when you've been working on a soil that has been underperforming for a lot of years, you get the core principle number 8.
Now Bill is going to talk about his last core principle number 8.
Which is, do not expect everything to change too fast. Because remember, this soil did not get to the condition it's in overnight. And when you're trying to improve it and build fertility over time, you're going to take a little bit of time. But the good news is that as you're improving, yields will improve to help sustain the programs and the soil building that you'll need to do over the long term. It is this idea that just be patient. Don't look at things to happen. We're all in a very, very, what do I want to say? Everything happens to happen real fast. We're in a this minute world. We're in a Instagram world. We're in a Facebook world where it just happens and things are changing rapidly, etc. There are so many components to your soil that there is no magic bullet that's going to go out there and immediately fix everything and you're immediately going to double your yield and everything's good from then on and I never have to worry about another thing. That's a pipe dream. That's not going to happen. You need to logically go through a lot of the information I'm giving you through the podcast to understand those things you need to do, like soil structure. Find yourself a good lab that can give you consistent lab results that you can depend on. Find a consultant that's got good education in the basics of soil fertility, not just trying to sell you the latest and greatest new magic bullet that's going to fix all your problems. Solid fertility will get you there. If there's a magic bullet that comes onto the program, it will just basically be part of the mainstream if it's that good. I've been in the business a long time. I'm still looking for one of the first ones to see there. A lot of times when you see a huge change or a massive change, it was you made the right change to your soil. Could be I've been low calcium for 20 years and all of a sudden I went out and limed this field and I haven't done it for forever and I got a huge response. It wasn't anything magic about the lime. The magic is getting in the soil structure proper so that microbiology flourish and thrive in those conditions, and then deliver and mineralize all the nutrients that you had available there, but just weren't available because the microbiology was stagnant. That's the true magic of soil, is the biological life that's in it, and us always trying to get that biology to do what it was intended to do, which is do the mineralization, to then deliver it to those crops, so that crops can then do what they were intended to do, which is grow and be plentiful and fruitful. And then our job is to harvest that and deliver that bounty to those that can consume it. So anyway, that's my core principles. You should start to make your own core principles and be what you need to do for your soil. So until next time, thanks for listening.
Thank you very much for another awesome episode of Agriculture in a Nutshell, Bill. I'm sure everyone listening very much so enjoyed listening to your 8 core principles. That was quite the fun episode, might I add. For all of you listening, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned for more episodes to come. And always stay curious.